Hi everyone, welcome to video 3.3. In today's lesson, you're going to be reading chapters 4 and 5 of our book, While the Locust Slept. And we're also going to be talking about something called the two-timeline narrative structure. So go ahead and get out your packet. You should have it open to page 16 to be taking some Cornell notes as you watch. So what does narrative structure mean? This is really just a fancy term to talk about how the book is organized. It's the map or the outline of the story. So in what order are the events told as we read this book? That is what a narrative structure is. If we think about the play we read, A Raisin in the Sun, this was told in one narrative structure. It started with the beginning in Act 1, and then it moved through the same timeline until the end of the play. If you think about our short story that we read, Simple Recipes by Madeleine Thien, this was mostly one narrative structure of telling the story of her childhood with her father teaching her to make rice. But there were some kind of like moments where she talked about her adult life and brought us into the present when she was an adult. So there were little moments of another timeline of events. Our book that we're reading, While the Locust Slept, has a two-timeline narrative structure. So what does that mean? That means that the story is organized using two separate timelines. You might have noticed that already, that we're seeing memories from Peter's childhood when he was younger, living in the orphanage or the state school. And we're also seeing stories about his time on the farm placement from when he's 15 and 16 years old. So let's think about an example in the media or pop culture. Some of you might have seen The Princess Bride. This was actually my dad's all-time favorite movie when I was a kid, so I watched this movie a lot. And this movie has a two-timeline narrative structure. It starts off with a grandpa telling his grandson a fairy tale and reading him a book. And then we also jump around in the movie to actually seeing the fairy tale come to life and seeing that story play out. So it kind of goes back and forth between these two stories, and we're seeing both of those timelines at the same time. So like I said in our book, While the Locust Slept, we're going to be seeing two different timelines in this story. There's the past timeline, which is Peter's memory from the state school or the orphanage from ages 1 to 15. So you'll notice here, in this paragraph, he is talking about living at the state school. You can tell he starts talking about staff from the state school or memories of mistreatment that he received at the state school. So that is a sign that he's talking about this past timeline from when he was a younger child. We also have the current timeline, which is Peter's life after leaving the school and when he's on the farm placement. So like I said, this is when he's 15 and 16 years old. It's when he lives with John and Emma Shawls, and it's when he's working on the farm. So sometimes it might feel kind of hard to keep track of these two timelines because he doesn't necessarily tell us when he's going back and forth between his memories. So we need to look for clues. Like when he's talking about the Shawls or the farm, this is his current timeline. If he's talking about things like C15, that means one of the places he lived at the state school. And so that means he's talking about the past timeline. So what are some of the effects of having a two-timeline narrative structure? In each example, Simple Recipes, The Princess Bride, and While the Locust Slept, we can see some of the effects of having multiple narrative structures. This allows the author to create connections between events. So we see Peter connecting things that happened to him at state school when he was younger to things that are happening to him on the farm when he's at his farm placement. We can also see the characters' reactions to these different events and different memories that have happened to him throughout his life. This also builds some curiosity and tension, the way that it goes back and forth between young Peter and teenage Peter. We get curious about, I wonder what happened in his childhood that made him feel this way. We can also follow the narrator's train of thought. So the really cool thing about this book is that it's his true life story, and he's telling us the memories of his childhood and of growing up. And sometimes when we have these kind of memories, they come to us out of order. It doesn't necessarily go from when you're a baby to when you're a teenager. And so we can follow Peter's train of thought and how he's processing the things that happened to him when he was a younger child and when he was a teenager. And I think that's a really special part of this book. So as you are reading chapters, 4 and 5 for this lesson, I really want you to pay attention to when he's talking about the past at the state school and when he's talking about farm placement. See if you can keep track of when he shifts between those two timelines, and see if you can keep noticing what some of the effects of this timeline structure are. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. I know this is kind of a confusing aspect of this book, and I hope you enjoy reading chapters 4 and 5.